Hello, everyone, and welcome to my talk. I'm super excited to be here at Kong Summit Digital this year. And I am Luca. I'm the VP of Engineering of CTO.ai. And today I'm going to take you through a journey of managing Kong workflows from Slack. We are going to see how to create an API Butler for the enterprise at your commands, right? So let's get started. Let me share my screen. So let's start with this talk. So I'm Luca Moravsky. As you can hear from my accent, I'm Italian. And I'm the VP of Engineering at CTO.ai here in Vancouver, Canada. And I just give you a brief overview of my past experiences just to contextualize this whole journey that we're going to walk together. Few years ago, I'm not going to take you to since I was 6 years old. I'm just taking the few years back. I worked in consultancy and in enterprise. And I also, most recently, was the chief architect at Talos Digital. So I saw basically the enterprise space from jumping from one Fortune 500 to another to being inside of a large organization, right? And most recently, after experiencing all these different, very interesting challenges, I took this opportunity and joined CTO.ai, a startup, right? They seem so different, but they are also so similar, these two environments. So what I experienced, what I saw with my eyes was the whole digital transformation journey, right? And within this journey, we all know how everything started, right? We started from the famous monolith, right? And this monolith evolved into microservices. And, you know, we are all here at Kong Summit because one way or another, we are working in the API and services space, right? But this transformation actually went beyond the simple, you know, services and API. It went from transforming monolithical and single-page applications, so these huge websites, into the most recent micro-frontends. And as you can see, the micro term is extremely important and recurrent in this journey. And we actually saw this transformation more recently with the introduction of big data pipelines and AI, but especially with the transformation of data, right? From the centralized data source, from the so-called centralized data warehouse to the data mesh, right? This new way of interpreting data in this large-scale, ephemeral, and highly distributed way, right? But the real transformation happened beyond the technology, right? So we saw that the organizations and the teams, people, changed from working in silos to a federated model, right? And as we are all experiencing as part of this crazy 2020, distribution became one of the core attributes of this new phase, right? So the acceleration in this transformation was escalated this year with a highly distributed nature of new organizations, right? But we all know that distribution requires a very high degree of coordination. And probably many of you are very familiar with the concept of distributed systems, right? And so we see that basically technology and people went hand in hand to transform from being tightly coupled to highly distributed and to resemble all the concept of a distributed system, right? And we actually kind of saw this transformation going from a low level of entropy to a high level of entropy. So we saw basically the system becoming from a huge single monolithical unit to fragmented and more atomic and independent units. And the eternal question in all this journey, right? Because we are all in one way or another as developers, as architects, as executives, right? Having this focus in this journey that is, how can we modernize while accelerating, right? Because we just said that distribution requires a higher degree of coordination, right? So we have a degree of complexity added to this system. And so, but how can we accelerate? And the core is basically how can we reduce friction, right? Because in order to accelerate, we need to reduce friction. We need to be able to decouple while still keeping coordinating, right? I'm probably kind of touching a little bit of mechanical physics here, right? So we are touching the thermodynamics principle right now, but they are actually highly connected to what is happening to this real world, especially to enterprise, but also to small startup, right? And in this kind of transformation, right? So the cross-pollination, it's a very important asset because imagine these teams, they are distributed, they are distributing themselves. So they're spreading across different areas of the organization, different geographical areas, right? And so now the real challenge is how do we cross-pollinate knowledge? Because people before they were sitting next to each other, and now they distribute more. And especially how can we coordinate asset reusability, which is basically at the drive of the all KPIs for many of the transformation journeys. And at the center, right, there is this requirement to build once and reuse everywhere. While actually we need to take care of reducing the logistical complexity. Now imagine that the whole journey is based on feedback loop, right? So we go from concept to market, we validate with the market feed back into this feedback loop, and the cycle restarts, right? So the logistical complexity from going from A to B needs to be solved, right? And in a frictionless way. And how do we do it is by simplifying and equally distribute operational workflows, right? Because we were used to a system, right, that was based on this very tightly coupled interaction and iteration. So the operational flow was very kind of humanly driven. And now we are decoupling them. And at the core, we need to simplify and equally distribute. Why? Because if you think, and probably this image easily represent what I'm trying to describe, right? So if we look it from the inside, everything looks as a unit, right? But if we take it from 10,000 feet, if we go outside of this atmosphere and look at the whole ecosystem, we will see that actually there is a high degree of coordination needed, and all these pieces that are moving, right, they need to make sense and need to be equally distributed. And basically the challenge that we still have is how do we discover, right? Because once again, the more we fragment, the more we distribute, imagine things are getting very distant, very, very far from each other. Discovery becomes very complicated, right? Because the path of discoverability gets more and more complex the more we fragment and distance pieces from each other. And this is basically the API transformation, right? Many of us, if not all of us, are in the middle of this wave. The API transformation started a few years ago and is still going, right? And we are here because Kong has been one of the major catalysts in accelerating a consistent API transformation, a frictionless API transformation. And you know, one of the things that I always heard in you know, at the executive level and also at the leadership level, and not only, also at the pure like do level, has been, but we have documentation, right? But I think that documentation it's a great it's a must-have, right? We all agree with the must-have. We must have documentation. However, documentation lacks of all the value that interactions are bringing together, right? So imagine a group of people together discussing about a problem, right? Documentation needs to be hydrated with this feedback, needs to be maintained, needs to be constantly validated and reconciled with people. Why? Because interactions, they are always happening in a very synchronous way. And as soon as we need to reconcile or validate documentation, it becomes asynchronous. So we add again more complexity to keep consistent and coordinated documentation. And so as we all know, because we are all have been victim one way or another of meetings, right? We go into meetings to discuss. We need meetings to discover. We go to meetings to ask. but meetings are expensive because they cost time, right? And if we think time is the constant that continuously drives, the KPI for acceleration, right? If we could stop time, we would all accelerate a lot, right? We would all do this. We would all build an API in no time. We would all deploy in no time. Unfortunately, time is there with us. And so if you look again at 10,000 feet and abstract the problem, you will see that the main challenge is always to keep these meetings efficient, right? And it's the eternal question: how can we make that? And so in all these things, the kind of variable that keeps meetings very inefficient most of the time is the chatty interaction, right? So this chatty interaction also gets very dispersed, right? The more we chat, even if we put a timer, we will always end up talking about something else or go over, right? And so, we take the focus from being highly focused to dispersely focused. And I think almost everyone knows these two tools, right? And these two tools, they were crucial in the past few months to help coordinating. So Slack on one side, Microsoft Teams on the other. There are these layers sitting in between as a moderator, as an orchestrator, as a dispatcher for all these requests. Imagine that you jump on Slack to ask something to somebody, right? It's faster than take your phone, make a phone call, and get directly to this person. But the same is Microsoft Teams. So this layer, they act as coordination layer. And so when we look at CTO.ai to this problem, we actually saw that, yes, Slack could act as one of these coordinator and dispatcher, right? But people would act on this mesh, on this operational mesh. Imagine that, because inevitably what we do in Slack is to solve logistical complexities, to solve business processes. When we ask a question, we are actually interacting with a workflow, with a question, with a business problem, with a technical problem, right? And so this is basically where Slack acts as or Microsoft Teams, that acts as a perfect coordinator in this phase. So we look at this problem, we said, but we all try to solve the same problem over and over again. The questions that we are asking are always the same, mostly. The answers might differ, but what doesn't differ are the processes to solve, right? And the more we evolve this interaction, the more these processes, they lean out, they simplify, they become more predictable. So we look at this problem, we said, but technology already brought us this kind of concept, right, of micro. Why don't we take a very complicated process, a process that takes a lot of iteration to be built and completed, a transaction, right, a business transaction inside of your organization, and simplify it at the bare minimum, like Docker did. We abstractly put in a box, like a microservice, and we make it reusable, like a micro-frontend. We make it easy to extend while we keep the same experience. We sit on top of Slack and the command line. I'm a command line guy. I use Vim. I use my terminal the whole time. I live inside of the terminal. And so that's my way to interact, right? But that doesn't differ. In order to equalize the access and the interactions, we need to provide multiple channels, like, for example, Slack, Microsoft Teams. And the most important thing is, in order to learn and to improve this process and make this process better and better and better and better again, we need to collect data, right? So if we take a step back and look at that picture, we see that basically this problem can be solved layering different tiers of overlay networks, right? I'm now hinting to a service mesh, right? That's why we call it the ops mesh. But I'm Italian. I love cooking. I love food. And if you check any of my talks, I always talk about food. And this time is no exception for you all, right? Let's cook this recipe. We just get the base, right? In Italian, we call it the soffritto, right? When you have onion, celery, and carrots as a base almost for everything. But now we need to put the ingredients, right? And here the ingredients are, I think, the most delicious and tasty ingredients in the market of APIs and services: Kong and Insomnia. I'm I left out our best friend Kuma for a second, just because I just want really to focus on this particular piece. But truth has to be told, we leverage Kuma largely, and I leverage Kuma largely in all my solution because I think it's the most elegant, is the ultimate service mesh. I can tell you, I tried many, none is as good as Kuma. If you haven't done it yet, check it out. But let's go back to Kong and Insomnia, right? We came with this idea, we conceptualized, we said building APIs is a continuous repeatable process. The whole process of governance is just a repetition, is a workflow. And, you know, I travel a lot. I told you I did a lot of consultancy. And so for me, it was very simple to resemble with a concept of a concierge. You go to an hotel, you discover a new place, you enter the concierge, dispatch you to different activities. You're looking for the best restaurant in town, they have it. The best museum, they have it. And so I said, we need to build the same. And that's where Slack meets an efficient API governance. Why? Because we are able to create workflows that can be equally distributed. And that's what humans usually did in meetings. That's what processes they did. That's what many companies, they ended up building over and over and over again. And so everything starts with generating an encapsulated application, right? So if you go and download the CTO.ai CLI, you will see that you can basically take an op, and an op can run, and you can generate your application. But you can do it with anything, right? It's not, I'm not here to sell you CTO.ai. I'm just using it because it's the most familiar thing that I'm playing with right now. But you can literally build it with anything. You can write your own bash script and template your application. But what I'm saying is that think about your service as an encapsulated, deterministic, repeatable unit, right? Because that's what microservices are. And now what we do, we inject an API manifest file, which eventually will transpile in a declarative configuration. And I think you are all starting to hint where I'm going. But let's start to look into this, right? And encapsulation allows for determinism, right? The most complicated thing is to create determinism in a distributed system. And encapsulation allows us to create this unit, this basically magic ball where we put our service and we're able to repeat it everywhere, right? Like Docker did, abstracted that encapsulation problem, that virtualization problem. And so let's look at the solution a little bit as a flow, right? So you generate your app, there is a manifest inside. Clearly you go through a wizard where you say, for example, and we will see later on, there are some business questions, right? So who owns this API? What is API doing? When is planned to be released? When is the plan to be retired, right? What is the current version, right? What are the dependencies? All those kind of business information, together with the pure and simple networking, right? Because we're building an API, somebody needs to consume it, right? It's a gRPC, and you can use it with this protobuf declaration, or is a REST or a GraphQL. And we push everything into Git because Git is our source of truth, right? And that's where Insomnia comes into place and brings that kind of editor, that kind of designer experience, right? And so that's how we can basically take something that is a pure structural information with something that is pure, you know, consumer-driven information, this API. We write our OAPI, so the Open API spec, and then that's where the magic comes into play. So our layer allows to basically expose functionalities through commands, pipelines, workflows, and expose it through different multi-channel. Can be a REST, can be a pipeline of a pipeline, but it can be a Slack command, and that's where I want to focus, right? So I'm in Slack, and I'm basically saying, hey, I have a new API. You can find the API there, deploy it. Register that, right? Because that's the most important thing. And we all know, right? We use DAC. DAC is brilliant. DAC solved this configuration, distributed configuration problem in a super elegant and sophisticated way, yet simple. That's why it's brilliant. If you're not using DAC, you should use it. So let's look at the journey of registering an API, right? So what happened is that you go in your Kong API concierge, you type ops register API, and your journey starts, right? Let's look at what kind of API. Oh, it's a REST API. Let's start to look into the team that is owning this API. Let's call them API pirates, right? And let's connect it with a GitHub repository. And in this case, we call this fictional company Duffy Enterprises. And the name of the API is going to be Party Management API, right? The manifest contains all this information. That's why link it with Git will allow the system to retrieve the information and propagate them everywhere, right? So there is a pipeline behind the scene. And let's apply a policy, right? I told you I would not mention Kuma, but I'm hinting there, right? So these policies are actually setting different policies in Kong. They're making it public or private or partner only, which applies basically restriction on API keys, authentication, and especially networking access through network provisioning. But the most important thing is that, bam, it's public. Let's move on. The concierge needs to start registering. The pipeline runs. And that's it, is register, right? This is the epi scenario, right? And in the epi scenario, we want to create a space for people to connect. And so we create a channel, a Slack channel that we call API Pirates, and we can link it to the API that we just deployed so that you know where to go to connect with the people that build that API, that are consuming that API. So we create a community inside of the organization through this process. And that's it. So we move on. What if the API already exists, right? And if the API already exists, what happens is that we are identifying the overlapping parts, right? And so we are actually suggesting you not to build something new, but to just connect with the people. And that's it. And that's when you enter the channel, you enter that conversation, and it's historical, it's there, we can reconcile them. But we spoke about discoverability, right? And what about searching an API? Searching an API is the same process. It goes through selecting the type of search that we want to do. Imagine that you want to search for a model, right? And so we are selecting party management, and the concierge is going to search for it, and bam, behind the scene, our platform is going to coordinate this. It's going to go into our registry, retrieve all the information, but especially it's going to act as a dispatcher. It's like an Uber for your APIs. It's going to take you from A to B in the most efficient and effective way. And that's it. And that's when you connect again with people, because let's not forget, behind these APIs, there are real people, right? And we don't want to forget about that. And there are different kind of type of search that you can do also by business domain. Imagine that you are searching for a specific description, right? I said in the manifest, there is also business description. For example, API to provide customer information, right? And so you search for individual full name, and then, it connects you with the API that can provide this business description, one or many, because, there might be multiple APIs, and that's the moment when you start to go deeper and discover. Clearly, the order is based on similarity and match with your search parameters. But sometimes you just need that property, right? You have that, for example, in this case, when we go for property, we're going to look for individual.fullname is connecting you with the services that have that property, right? So we want to remove the friction between you and your acceleration, and acceleration of your team, and acceleration to business and to market. And the most important thing is that we never forget about connecting you where to find the API, but especially how to connect with the people that build this API. And if you look at the holistic picture, and I would love actually to take a couple of minutes here, is that, like I told you, the search happens because we have this declarative format, right? We have encapsulated code, so we can deterministically kind of traverse the configuration of that particular application. We have the Kong declarative configuration that is structural, right? It basically gives routes, policies, and those kind of things. And then there is the API manifest that describe actually how this API fits in the enterprise or the public ecosystem. It goes through a pipeline, and as you can see, basically gets propagated into an internal catalog, but especially gets injected into Kong, right? Kong, like I said, there is a sidecar, and now we will discover why. All this pipeline pushes data into Elasticsearch because we want to be fast. We are learning on how you're searching. We're learning through your patterns. And so we connect with Slack or other channels, but the most important thing is that we continuously connect business metrics with operational metrics, because we want to optimize your path from ideation to production, and we want to reduce the friction and the cost of maintainability. And Kong did a phenomenal job on creating a platform that can be, augmented by all these kind of functional layers on top. So thanks again to Kong for building this phenomenal product, right? And Kuma to extend the concept of distribution to the next level. But I want actually to invite everyone to join our community where we can continue this conversation. This one, it was just a teaser. I wanted to tease, I wanted to give you that appetizer to continue that conversation, because we really believe that this is one of the use cases that we are going to open source. We are going to make it open and available to you guys, to everyone. So please also keep an eye on our GitHub, because we are going to soon release, most likely this old package is going to be released as an op before the end of the year. We are working to finalize and putting together pieces, so you will be able to have your own personalized concierge, right? And so as every Italian, I want to thank you for listening to this journey, to this story. And I hope you got some valuable notes, and I hope you will join our community. I hope you will start using what we are building, because we really believe in reducing that friction and that logistical complexity. But I want to say ciao and grazie to everyone. And I want to invite every one of you to join me at the Q&A session, to type your questions in the chat, and I will be more than happy to answer to any question you might have. See you in a bit.